I've got a theory that I want to explore with you today, and that is that procrastination is fine. Avoidance and paralyzation are not. But procrastination itself, I think oftentimes it's just part of the creative process. I'm not saying you should sit around and do nothing and, build up anxiety about your upcoming project, anything but. But I do think putting it off is sometimes an important part of the development of your ideas. Let's talk about that some today. I am your host, Chris. This is Game, Develop, Repeat. I want to, as always, draw a connection between video games and real life. And today I want to draw a connection between JRPGs and the motivation behind procrastination. We can throw Souls-like games in there too. By the way, I am going to try to give you some very specific practical tips for dealing with procrastination in the develop portion of this episode, so in the next segment. But first, this video game analogy. When you start playing a JRPG, you start at the beginning, you get to the end, right? Easy, straightforward, simple, clean. It's all laid out for you. When you start, you're not thinking about that final boss. You haven't met the final boss. You don't know what's going on there. When you start a Souls-like game, you're not thinking about the final boss. And if you are, the moment you start that game, you are so immersed in the world. You're so sucked into everything that you're not thinking about how the game is going to end. You're thinking about what's going on right now. So, when you start a project, I want you to think about the times you're procrastinating and the times that you're not. When you're going into the project, at least for me, it is often the case that I procrastinate because I am looking at the end of the game. I am looking at the end of the project. I'm looking at the completion date. I'm looking at everything that I've got to do all at once, and I'm going, okay, how am I ever going to beat the final boss? I've mentioned this before. I'll mention it again. It is a major part of procrastination for me. Because it feels good to look at it and go, I'm going to be a novelist one day. I'm going to be a game developer one day. I will finish the game and then I'll have made a game. I will finish this project and then I will be a carpenter, a novelist, a college graduate, a this, a that, a the other, whatever it may be. But then you start thinking about it and you're going, can I ever really do that? And this is where I want to tie the JRPG back in. At the end of every JRPG, I don't know what the deal is with this, but at the end of every JRPG, especially Final Fantasy games, you end up fighting God, or something that is kind of a metaphor for God, or on the level of a deity, right? You start the game fighting like a couple little rats. I guess that's more of a CRPG thing than a JRPG thing, but whatever. You start the game fighting something very, very basic, a worm, a caterpillar, a rat, a something along those lines, and then you end the game fighting a god. Well, next time that you feel yourself start to procrastinate, next time that you go, how am I ever going to finish this massive project? I want you to remind yourself that you don't have to fight the god right now. That's for later. It's not your job to finish the project right in this moment. It's your job to get immersed in the project and work on it. Just like when you're playing a game, your role is to get immersed in the game and enjoy it, and eventually you'll get to the end of it. You'll work through the goals, and you'll get there. Sometimes you might go a little off track or do some crazy side quests that you don't need to be doing, or just do some grinding or some cosmetic stuff or whatever that really stretches out the time of the project. Maybe you don't have time for that on this project, so you're going to do a pretty straight line, and you might hit some more difficult chunks doing that straight line. So be it. But your role is not to skip to the end. You don't have cheat codes in real life. At least I don't think you do. If you do, send me the cheat codes. Hit me up. anxiousbuddhagames@gmail.com. Give me that Konami code for getting really good at game development. Thank you. The project is going to take time. And you can sit there and you can get annoyed about how long it's going to take, and you can get frustrated and you can procrastinate because you go, oh, I'll never finish this. Or you can just enjoy the path forward. You can lean into it. You can go, this is kind of nice. This is difficult, but I'm learning. This is exciting. I've made so much progress. Ooh, look at this enemy I just fought, right? If you tell somebody, hey, play this game, and they go, why? And then you go, it's 100 hours. They're going to say no. They're going to go, no, that's awful. That's terrible. Why would I do that? And a lot of the times when somebody's like, I want to write a novel, everybody just says to them, it's going to take you years. And then you go, okay, never mind. I don't want to write a novel. Well, okay, sure. We can talk about how long it takes and we can talk about how much work it is, but nobody talks about the joy of writing a thing. A lot of the time people have this whole conversation, and I guess I'm falling into this trap a little bit right now, so let me break it. You have this whole conversation where you go, oh, that's going to be a huge undertaking. That's going to be so hard. It's going to fail. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. You're going to lose money. You're going to lose time with your family, blah, 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 blah. You can have that whole conversation. But how many times has somebody said to you, oh my God, I love working on a novel because I learned so much about myself. I was working on writing this novel and I was writing this character and I realized that to some extent this character was a reflection of my relationship with this person in the past. And as I was working on that, I really processed that, and then I started to understand them a little bit more, and I was looking at it and I was going, oh, I guess some of their behavior makes more sense now that I'm putting myself in the shoes of this character. Or I was designing this environment, and as I was designing it, I was thinking about, why am I picking this environment? What is it about this that appeals to me? And then I realized I really want to spend some time out in the woods. I really want to do some exploration there. Or oh man, I have this deep longing for this particular experience that I never recognized before. But now that I started working on this creative project, I really got to get in touch with this element of myself. And now I understand myself better as a result of this project. We don't have that conversation. Why aren't we having that conversation every single day when we're talking about making stuff? We're always going, how do I finish it? How do I finish it? How do I finish it? Oh, it's so hard. It's so hard. It's so hard. Oh, the tortured artist. Why aren't we saying, look at all these freaking benefits? It's incredible. I was working on this song the other day, and I don't know what it was, but something in it really moved me. Why aren't we having that conversation? Something in this song really moved me, and I can't put it into words. That's why we're not having the conversation. I can't put it into words, but I felt something. I discovered something about myself, and it's hard to communicate how incredible this is to people, but it's so important that you explore your creativity, right? And then we go, yeah, but are you going to make any money off the album? That sounds so cool. How can you? Are you going to sell it? Because then people are give me that experience somehow. It's no, I had an internal experience while making something, and I want you to do that too. And we put off making things because we're worried about the end. That's not the point. I mean, we think it is, and it kind of is, because we want to share it and we want to connect with people with that, and we want them to understand something about ourselves through the things that we've created. And sometimes we want to make some money. I mean, fair, right? There's really no harm in that, until it becomes the main factor, the single driving force, in which case it starts to become a bit of a mess. But there's so much beauty in the process, and we get so distracted from that incredible, wonderful process. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to get sappy for a second. Wow, I got deep in the first 10 minutes of this, deep into my own thoughts about this. But look at Tallest Tower Games, Distinguished Humans, Indie Game Dev Club, those guys. The guys that inspired me to start this podcast, Zach and Brad. Look at them. They started a whole thing, and it brought people together, and it inspired me. And then I started working on a thing, and then that brought some people together. And then there was a D&D group that we were all playing games together in the Discord, and got to chat with people from other countries and connect with all these other people who are working towards making games. it's not about us finishing games, right? Fev is working on this bird game, which I'm so excited about. And I'm not excited about it because I want to see the finished game. I think I've said to him that I want to see the finished game. Well, you know what, Fev, if you're listening right now, it's fine. You don't even finish the game. I mean, do if you want to, but I'm excited about seeing what you're making because it's so cool to see what is coming out of somebody else's mind. When I first saw that game, I was like, oh, what is this console he's putting it on? This is so exciting because he's working on the Playdate. I was like, this is so cool. Oh, this artwork is so cool. This is inspiring to me. I want to explore this interest. I want to find out more about it. That is the game we are playing when we're making stuff. And if you're focused on that game, it's going to be hard to keep yourself from creating stuff. I mean, there are still other things that can make you procrastinate for sure. Caring about it too much can make you procrastinate. But I think you're going to end up making stuff if you're connected to how incredible it feels to make something cool and how much you learn about yourself and how much you connect with other people. Let's get into a couple practical tips for dealing with procrastination, and then I'll talk about my game development just a little bit, little game dev update today. First off, there are things that you're going to need to accept. I think that this is a huge part of dealing with procrastination, is accepting some of the harsh realities of making something, of working on something. And one of those harsh realities is you're going to waste a lot of time. You're going to do something, you're going to redo it. You're going to redo it again. You're going to have to reset everything. It's just what's going to happen. You're going to work through it, realize something is wrong, and go, crap, I have to spend another 40 hours on this thing that I just spent 40 hours on. That is a reality. And it is fine, and it's going to happen. So why is this relevant to procrastination? Because once you accept this, you're going to be a little less worried about planning it perfectly the first time. It's just, there's no such thing as perfect planning. It's going to go wrong. You're going to redo things. So just do a little bit of planning and then just try it. Don't waste like 40 hours going, I have to figure out the perfect starting point. Just try. Just try it out, Don't just dive in without a parachute, but do dive in, We need to get in there. So that's one. You're going to waste time. It's fine. Two, there are going to be portions of it that are miserable. But, and this is very, very important in all things, not just creativity. I firmly believe this. It is more miserable to complain about how miserable something is going to be than it is to just do the thing. Once you just start doing the thing, generally speaking, you kind of have a good time. There have been times at my new job where I am screaming profanity because something is so frustrating, and I'm in an environment where that is not just welcomed but somewhat encouraged. There are times where, because it's like physical labor and some things are just extremely frustrating physically. There have been times when I am just so mad at something and I kind of enjoy it, right? There's a moment where you go like, man, but I'm trying really hard. This is so great. In contrast, there are times where it's like somebody's just talking about how difficult something is going to be to do in a way that's like not really planning, but just kind of complaining about it. And I'm like, this is the most miserable I think I've ever been. Just waiting to do this thing. I would rather be up in the rafters slamming on metal trying to get it to bend properly because it's like just like a quarter of an inch off and we just need to do this thing, that thing, the other. Like I would rather be exerting the ever-living crap out of my body right now than thinking about how hard it's going to be to exert the ever-living crap out of my body. And I think that applies to all things mental. I think that if you are procrastinating because, it's going to suck so much, you need to understand and experience the truth that it's just not that bad. Like when you're actually doing it, notice that it's not that bad because you're not paying attention to how bad it is. But when you're prepping to do it, you're going to be like, oh, this is the worst thing I've ever had to do. Granted, sometimes you're going to run into something that's just impossible. Oh, whoops, cell phone's going off. I like this take, so we're leaving that in. Sometimes you're going to run into something that just feels impossible to do, and it's going to be miserable, and you're going to have to step away from it for sure, and you're going to dread going back in on it. But even in those cases, once you're done, oh, it's going to be satisfying, right? Once you finish something like that, you feel like a god. Or even if you just find a way around it, you find some kind of workaround. So, to summarize those 2 tips, and then I'm going to see if I have a third. I think it's the 2, but I think they're huge. 1, you're going to waste time. Accept it. It's okay. 2, do not just complain about the thing. Start doing it. The moment you get yourself just complaining, you're making yourself more miserable. Start doing the thing. Planning is different, but you know. Oh, you know what? I do have number 3. Make it small. Focus on just one thing. Just make it small. Focus on one thing. It's fine. You don't have to finish the whole thing today. Stop looking at the big picture. Shut up. It's fine. Bring it down. It's cool. Just a little bit. Get the ego out of the way. You just are making something, and then focus on making something. Those are the practical tips. That's it. That's what I got. Oh, and I guess be okay with the fact that you procrastinate. It's all right. It's cool. Just pause. Don't do anything. Don't go playing a game or nothing. Just procrastinate by sitting there for a minute. Just sit there. That's from Healthy Gamer GG, by the way. They just like sit there. Just do nothing. Either do the work or do nothing. Maybe you need to sleep. Maybe you need a nap. Fine. Whatever. That's cool. But don't start playing a game. Don't start checking Facebook. Don't start looking at your phone. There's another huge one. Just put your phone somewhere else. It's fine. That's all I've got for now for practical tips. Now, let me update you on my game dev a little bit, because I feel like I've made a good, huge step forward for the first time in a while, which has felt very nice. I'm satisfied. I've been working on the general implementation and structure of this fish dating simulator that I'm making, this like parody of dating apps that I'm working on. And I had this whole system in place. I'm going to avoid all the technical details. I'm just going to speak about this from like a game design perspective. I had a system in place in which you are swiping through the fish, and then you select the fish, and then you try to catch them. And the idea was that the mechanic was you're swiping through, and you're hoping for a certain fish, and then you catch them, and so on and so on. But then that initiates a conversation, which then causes a problem of you're going back and you're re-swiping for the same fish that you've already had this whole match with and conversation, all this stuff. And it doesn't make sense for like the app design within the world that I'm setting. It doesn't make sense for you to rematch with them. And I was like, maybe I can make some elaborate excuse. And I went, oh, wait, no, I need to just design this differently. It needs to be that you catch the fish, and then that initiates the next round of the conversation. And then you see their profile on the app and stuff, but you're just catching them, or like you're getting messages while you're just out fishing. There's a bunch of different ways to do it, but basically I've switched it to be fish first, and then you see the profile, rather than scrolling through profiles and then selecting a fish to try to catch. It's just a better overall structure for the game, which got me really excited because this was something I was struggling with. I also tried to figure out randomization of loot tables. The first day I tried to work on that, I fell asleep within 20 minutes because I was trying to read really technical stuff that I didn't understand. So I just passed out because it was also after a day of hard physical labor. So I didn't really have it in me, turns out. But I started trying to figure that out. I've kind of drafted some ideas for how to make that work. I'm not going to try to explain it on the podcast because it's very like, it's too in the weeds, and it's going to take forever to explain without being very clear. But I'm trying to figure out how to do randomization in a way that gives me a lot of control over a very frequently changing pool of fish. And I ended up just looking at the big picture game design instead. I drew up like a visual draft of all of the screens that are going to be in the game, which is really nice. I did kind of a pros and cons of the fish first versus app first fish selection thing where like you're either swiping or you're just catching a fish and then finding out what it is. And I think the idea of it being a surprise every time you catch a fish is really important. Oh, and from all of this, here's a weird tip. I really firmly believe. Now, I don't have a ton of dev experience, right? I've made the one game, I've worked on a couple little projects that I'm like, trying to figure out my next commercial thing, which is going to be this fishing game. It feels like it's definitely my next commercial project. But I've done little game jam style things. In my opinion, it is so important to get a visual draft of your user interface early on. I think just drafting up, I mean just lines, circles, squares, getting some kind of a UI thing really early on seems so important to me because the number of times that a slapped on UI has ruined a game for me is crazy. And the importance of a user interface in the game flow is massive. Think about how important it is. That is the steering wheel of your car. That is so huge. Think about a website with a bad UI, anything with a bad UI. That is, if you're using a desk and there's just stuff in the way of where your mouse is supposed to be and there's no room to put things, that's what's happening if your game is not designed with the UI in mind. You end up just slapping UI into things that are like already visually important. Like, you gotta plan around the user interface. This is how the player is interacting with the game. You need to have a nice, clean, clear communication going on. You can't just throw it on at the end. It can't be an afterthought. I think it needs to be a core part of planning the flow of the game, the whole visual appeal of the game, the buttons that you're using, the hotkeys, all of this stuff. It is like so core to the gameplay in my mind. It's huge. And I mean, luckily we have tropes that we can rely on, but I do think that from the beginning you should look at it and go, how is this going to look? How is this going to feel? How is the player going to communicate with it? Is it going to be on mobile? How are we using game pads? Accessibility things, mouse and keyboard, gamepad, mobile. Jesus, it's so huge. And that's the update on the game dev side of things. I also find it inspiring. Let me add that in really quickly at the end here. I find it inspiring to look at the UI setup. I find that it clarifies my vision in really interesting ways. And I would encourage you to try it out yourself. Okay, let's wrap this thing up. I've got a weird question for you, which is, what games do you procrastinate on? What games do you not play even though you want to? Because it's got a different feeling than procrastinating on a creative project, right? Because you're kind of like, you're not really like ashamed of it, right? You're not like, oh, I really should be playing that game, because it's a game, whatever. It's a hobby. It fills some time. So maybe there's a little bit more clarity in terms of, why am I procrastinating? And maybe there's some crossover between that procrastination and your game development procrastination. So I really want you to like dig into that question a little bit. You go, why do I put off playing this particular game? Am I hoping for something out of it? Am I already halfway through and I don't want to pick it back up and realize that I have to restart because I don't remember what exactly I was doing last time I was playing? Am I worried that I'm going to be lost? Am I worried that I'm not going to enjoy it? What is it? I feel like for me, it's any number of those, and it just depends on the game. Or there are games that I'm waiting for because I go, oh, I want to play this at the right time. I'm just not in the mood for it. And that can be a valid reason not to develop something too. You might just not be in the mood for it. Okay? Do something else. Develop something else. Work on something else. Make some music. Make some art. Who cares? But whatever you do, get out there. Make some stuff. Whatever stuff it may be. and have fun with it. How'd you like that transition? That was kind of cheesy. I didn't love that ending. But anyway, I will see you all in the next one. Thanks for hanging out. Bye-bye.